Hi, and welcome to part 5 of drawing Batgirl. Today we're just going to be continuing the coloring process, putting in highlights where it ought to be, and I think I actually, in this video, fixed the hair. So let's get started. Hi, my name is Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years, and I'm here to empower you. If you remember the last time I messed up, and I started adding light in the wrong way. And so this time around, I will approach lighting in a better way. Let's just say that, because it's possible that the other way that I was doing it could still work, but the way that I approach it in this video is going to be better. So let's start the video here. So the very first thing I do is I take off, I turn off the light layer that I spent like 30 minutes doing. Like I said last time, I sped up the video. That was the only time so far that I've sped up the video, is only because it would have been a complete waste of time to watch me do it. I just needed to show you that what I did and how I ended up spending the time and why I had to turn off this layer and start over. So unlike the last time, what I ended up doing was I took a sample, I believe I took a sample of the purple, and I did the opposite of what I did with the shadow layer, which was to take the color and then I moved it closer to warm, and then I increased the tint. So the tint being, I moved the little cursor on the color graph up and to the right. I mean up and to the left. I'm sorry. And then I started adding that color of brightness on any area that was getting hit most by light, lightening up the colors of those areas. So that is what I'm going to be doing throughout this this part of the process. And again, at this point, I have to be a little bit slower, and I got to be a little bit more careful, which means that the process takes much longer. So looking at the video here and seeing the stats, it's probably, this whole video is going to be about 35 to 40 minutes, something like that. So throughout the entire body, I gotta lighten up all the areas where light is hitting it the hardest. It's the most direct. As the color turns away from the light, it exposes more of the local color of the actual jacket. So the local color of the jacket is that purple color, but when it gets hit by light, it lightens up and becomes a different color in those areas. The color gets washed out, and it takes on a little bit of the properties of the actual light source color. So, and I'm assuming it's going to be a yellow light source, so it should have a little bit more yellow in the color, and it should have and it should be a lighter, brighter color, a tinted version of the color. I'm not sure if I chose exactly the best color here. It looks a little bit blue, considering that this was a purple color. But sometimes one of the interesting things about color is that you kind of you can get away with having the incorrect color as long as it's got the right temperature and the right value. So you can pick colors that don't work or aren't natural, but it will still look right if it's the right temperature and the right value, which is really strange. So I'm just treating this arm like a cylinder, so there's a one area that's going to be brighter than all the other parts. So again, it's exactly the same thing that I did with the shadows. I take every individual limb, every individual part of the body, and I break it down into a simple shape, and then I shade it as if I was shading or adding tone to a simple shape, like a cylinder, cube, or a sphere. So remember how I told you that that one time in the last video that I kept messing up when I moved away from the pigment, and so now I created a palette layer where I made a blotch, a little circle there of the color I was using, so that when I need to go back to the color I was using, I can do so, and it'll be the accurate color that I was using, as opposed to selecting from that shadow layer and not finding the color that I was trying to use. This time around, I just created a palette layer to keep track of the color I was using in case I needed to sample it again. And also, if you notice, I'm not being perfect about the blending of these colors. They're not. It's a little sloppy, and it's mostly because it doesn't need to be perfectly. It's the same reason I'm not using an airbrush, the airbrush tool. I'm using the color pencil tool because I want it to have a graininess to it. I want it to have a clear division of tones. I want it to feel organic. I don't want it to feel like an airbrushed painting that everything is super smooth. I want to see the brush strokes. I want to see the texture of the pen. I want something that feels like it's analog. It has something tangible, like there was an actual stroke being made. I don't need it to be super smooth. It's really unnecessary. Also, I found that making everything absolutely super smooth just makes it look more digital than I'd like, and I'd rather just have it feel right. So here's feel organic, feel natural, feel like a drawing and not necessarily like some digital work. I was gonna say that this bit here that I'm doing with this kind of like edge, on the first one that I did over on the bottom left there, it's in the wrong side. So I ended up eventually deleting it. And I put it on the correct side. I'm also noticing right now that the shadow on the seam, that thing that goes right through the middle, once it gets below the belt, it's still, it doesn't have the right color. It's not blue. It's still the same gray, the gray color. I don't know if I end up fixing it or not, but I couldn't have possibly not noticed it. I may have noticed it. Maybe I didn't notice it until just now. But it's interesting because I just noticed that when I put in that blue highlight, it doesn't become as noticeable. Because in comparison to the blue, that orangey looking gray suddenly became very neutral, and it looked really kind of, looks like it works. Looks kind of blue, which is color. It's just the way our optics work. I don't think it's a good idea to put that light there. Maybe it is. I don't know. The leg, and I'm not talking about the leg. I'm just talking about right underneath right above the crotch. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's too strong. I think that's what it is. Maybe I'll go back and kind of. So when and again, like whenever I decide that I want to lighten something up, or there you go. See, I'm lightening it up. Whenever I want to lighten something up, I always click on the checkered box. You can see it on the bottom right there, or on the bottom left over there. It's still the same checkered box. It just basically makes it an eraser. And I'm looking around now. See if I missed a spot. Still looking for a blue. Okay, so now I picked the orange. You could see me moving it, tinting it, and moving it closer to warm, and moving the thing and tinting it, lightening it up a bit. And it's most saturated in the middle, and then as it goes to the edges, it gets less and less saturated. The color starts veering off and losing steam. And apparently I thought it still needed to be even more yellow than I had it, so I actually did another pass. Now I'm going to need to make a palette here, or turn on my palette layer, and then making a swatch of the color I'm using. So here, eventually, because once I stop using this color, if I need to come back to it, I'm going to need a sample of what color I was actually using. Oops. So I'm getting rid of it, going into the checkered selection, just to. Okay, and there it goes. Okay, so notice that now my shadows kind of don't seem to work all that well. So what's going on here is that I'm lighting I'm adding the light and well, maybe not. There's a direction of the light that it's coming from, and I'm not sure if in the last video, during the sped up video, I end up changing the shadow or not. But somewhere along the line, I know that I do change. Oh, there's the swatch. So I just turned on the palette and I made a swatch of the yellow because I'm going to switch. Or maybe not right away. Right now I'm just deleting, and I keep picking the wrong layer to delete from. So as I apply this yellow, it really starts to really make the transition, and the objects start really kind of popping. And that's the intent. That's what's supposed to happen. But like I said, the shadow that I did, I recall at some point that I was like, well, if the light's coming from here, I need more room, so I adjusted the shadow shape. And I don't know if I did it in the last video during the sped up part, or if I'm going to do it a little bit later. Or if I'm misremembering. And I just closed my eyes. I'm falling asleep again. This is around the time that I'm starting to get tired again. Okay, so I'm adding some of the light into the cape. Again, I will eventually fix this cape. So here's something that I fix later. The highlight layer, the layer that the lightening of the color layer, is right over right now the shadow layer, the shadow mask layer. So that means that the shadow is not affecting that lightening of the section, and this is not my intent. My intent is that the section gets lighter there, and then the shadow affects it anyway. And there it popped on me because of my wrist. My wrist touched something and it popped away. Does that a lot. It does that a lot. The Wacom Cintiq hybrid tablet that I'm using does that quite a bit. It's extremely annoying that it registers my palm or my wrist, and I don't know what it does, but maybe I'm hitting the bar underneath or something, but when I move it, it hits it, and it always zooms away. It moves over the corner. So anytime that you see me drawing it, and suddenly it just drawing just flies to the left. My wrist had hit something and it's made it fly off in that direction. So reducing, increasing the warmth and increasing the tint by moving the tone to far to the left. And making a sample on my palette layer. And notice that this is where, oh no, this is not where I was gonna say this is where I turned that blue into a darker orange, but it isn't. This is where I lighten up the hair so that it's getting a little bit of highlight. And it feels a little oranger, orangey-er, but I think I end up changing it to a brighter orange because at this point it looked, the color that I picked, this yellow color I picked, actually made the hair look blonde. It was too yellow, and so the hair that the local color, the hair of the local color was too close to brown, and so it ended up looking kind of blonde. So perhaps at this point I noticed that I have the light colored layer above the shadows. Perhaps I do that, perhaps not. Or perhaps I noticed that I'm not coloring on the correct layer, because the layer I'm supposed to be coloring on is layer 10 there, and I'm actually coloring on the wrong layer. So I'm checking to see where that I just messed up. So I'm gonna go find where I messed up on the history, and I'm gonna have to recolor still in the wrong place. This is what happens sometimes if you're not paying attention. You end up coloring on the wrong layer, and it's really messed up. So now I have layer 10 selected, and I have to go back in and add the light again where it needs to be. One of the reasons why I noticed that the light wasn't where it needed to be was because the shadows were affecting the highlight layer that I was putting in, as opposed to painting on top of it. And that was my take a nap alarm. I don't know if you heard it. So I set my alarm on my phone. I have an alarm telling me when it's nap time. Usually I take a nap at 2. I wake up early just about every day. But because of that, and it's not like I go to bed late at night, but because I go to bed early, and because I wake up early, I need to at least have at least one nap time, one time to take a nap to be able to recover and continue throughout the day. And that's probably why my body's slowing down right now as I'm doing this recording. Similar to the last video, I was recording it around my nap time, and I was just ready to pass out. So again, I sampled the skin tone here. I increased the temperature to warm, and then I lightened it up. I tinted the color, and I'm just adding a little bit of extra light coming in. And I'm thinking planes of the head. I'm thinking where the planes of the head are. I'm thinking, especially in faces and heads, it's best to think about it in boxy terms. Where would a front plane be and a side plane? And when it comes to the eyes, you're thinking about them in cylindrical. It's a cylinder. And when it comes to this cheek area, it's best to like try to think about it as a cylindrical chunk. Now, I don't know if I made a palette sample here before I changed. And it seems like I don't think it's light enough. So I moved the color. Oh yeah, I did do a sample. It's right there next to that color. So, like I said, very, very, very useful to make a sample. I just sampled the mouth. I'm increasing the warmth, but I didn't tint it. So I'm going to try again. Now I tint it and I increase the warmth a little bit more. There we go. Taking a look around the picture, seeing what needs to be done, deciding what to tackle next. It looks like I'm almost done. So this is where, when I check my original light layer and see if I just turn it on, if it'll work, and it turns out that it doesn't. It doesn't work at all. So I realized that I'm going to have to toss this entire layer. So I'm going to select it and delete it. And clear. And now I'm going to add that yellow tint on top of that color that I just did. But far less of it than I did in the last video. So there I do my little sample, but I didn't put it in the palette layer, I put it in the light layer. So now it's in the correct layer. And there I go, adding yellow to the all the color. That means on top of the blue as well, not just this emblem is going to have yellow on it, but the blue is also going to be yellow because that's the color of the light. So if the color of the light was white, I would be adding white. The color of the light is yellow, so I'm adding yellow. If the color of the light was green, I would be adding green. If it was red, I'd be adding red. If it was blue, I'd be adding blue. Where the light hits the most is when you actually see the real color of the light, and then it just slowly fades into the light, the tinted color of the color that it's of the local color that it's on, and then from the tinted color of that lightened up color, it becomes the local color, and the closer to shadow it gets, the warmer it the cooler the color starts becoming, the more toned down the color starts becoming, the more muted, and then as it goes into shadow, it loses its the local color altogether. It should start becoming more and more gray. Or more and more black, depending on how dark the darkness. So I'm just adding a little bit of an accent of yellow on top of the light blue on the arm and on the gloves, on the lips, on the nose, pretty much everywhere. The eyes. To be honest, this shouldn't be white highlights. It should be yellow highlights. I totally forgot about that, so it stays white. But I should have just gotten the paint bucket tool and boop boop, 2 yellow dots there instead of 2 white dots. Just colored those highlights yellow. Of course, I didn't color the teeth yellow because then that would make her look gross. Added a little bit of that light into the eyeball. I don't know if it was working. I don't know if I delete it or diffuse it. I'm looking for areas where I could pop that yellow in. So that's why I zoomed out and I just kind of stared there for a second. Earlier there was a big pause that I may have cut out because there was a big pause. But even that big pause, I think it was actually me staring, thinking, seeing if that was if everything was in order, if everything was okay before I started putting this yellow on there. I think it was just me thinking about putting in the yellow. At this point, I'm realizing that perhaps the best thing to do is to move the mask on top of that layer 10. And again, I remember how I said, even when I was doing this, that I wasn't really quite happy with the shadow. Well, I go in and start making adjustments on that shadow layer eventually. I just keep adjusting it. So I zoom in and lighten up some of that yellow in the hair. I think I eventually get to the buttons on the cape too. There we go. So I discovered something here. Oh, I think I wasn't coloring on the correct layer. There we go. Add a little bit of yellow on here. So I'm looking for areas that need yellow, and really where the place that really needed yellow is right there where I'm doing it. It's that's actually the plane of the top of the collar that sometimes I confuse myself about that. I wasn't clear on it myself, and I kind of messed it up a bit. Let's see. So I got the airbrush tool, and I'm okay. So now notice that I've selected the shadow layer. So this is where I start messing more with the shadows. So up until this point, this shadow has been what's called a hard shadow. Hard shadow is, well, it's got a hard edge to it. Shadows, there's three types of shadows. There's soft shadows, hard shadows, and firm shadows. Soft shadows are the ones that are so gradual because the light is so far away that you can barely see the transition. A firm shadow is what I'm doing right here, where you can see the transition, but it's softer. And then there's the hard shadow, which is usually cast when a cast shadow is being cast from very close to from a light source that's very close. So I'm creating a firm shadow on everything because the shadow is still close, but it's not. But it's still a round shape, so it makes a firm shadow rather than a completely soft shadow. A soft shadow is reserved for when the light source is extremely far away or it's extremely dim, and then so the transition again is so subtle that it takes a long time to transition into shadow. But because it's such a fast, more direct transition into shadow, round shapes tend to have a firm shadow, not a hard shadow. And again, unless of course it's a cast shadow, and a cast shadow then is hard. You leave it it's abrupt. It's just, and that's usually a cast shadow. Like under the neck would be a cast shadow. See, so that's a firm shadow there, but that little thing under cheek, that's a hard shadow there. Underneath the chin, like the shadow between the chin and the neck, that shadow is hard. And then so the rest of her face would have a much firmer, softer shadow there. So yeah, I'm softening the shadow so it's not so hard. It's a lot more firmer. It's a lot more firm, I should say, because they're rounder shapes. I'm looking for areas where I could firm up the shadow instead of any areas that I kept hard. That should be right here. That should be a soft shadow, or softer. It's not a soft shadow, it's a softer shadow. There, that is too hard. I need to soften it. Soften the line, I should say. Not add a soft shadow, but a firm shadow. And that's it. That's the end of that video, where I leave it there. I forgot what happens in the next video. I think that's where I add the extra hair and a little bit more of the finishing touches. I also start adjusting a bunch of the shadows and things like that, so lightening up areas and things like that. So thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, I highly encourage you to go over to my Patreon and support me there. You will get the videos ahead of everybody else. on top of a ton of different rewards. I've got years and years of downloadable content that you can download. Once you become a patron, there's high-res JPEGs of work. There's PSD files that you could examine and see for yourself what I'm doing. This particular PSD file is going to be there if it isn't there already. If you're looking at this in the future, it's obviously already there. And I also do coaching there. If you want to improve and you want me to help you improve, you could join my coaching level there, and I do my darndest to help you improve and become a better artist. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, bye.